And that has been treated like a crime by Israel defenders. When people see that, when your parents see stuff like that, even on the periphery, they go, oh, this is, I guess they just say this about everybody. That's why I loved the France Unbowed party member that was asked about me interviewing Mélenchon. Someone send me the link, please.
To overstate how hellish
this audio was asked, by the way, but here's Ezra talking about Israel.
In Gaza's been over the past 20 months.
I gotta pee.
Watching the daily clips on the international media of smoke and fire when the buildings in Gaza are destroyed by Israeli planes. To say that you can't be devastated unless you are also an anti-Semite is childish, is simplistic, and it's not true.
At least 1.9 million of the 2.1 million Gazans have been displaced. And displaced. And displaced.
Israel has decided to stop letting goods and supplies into Gaza.
Starvation is everywhere.
We've done that because Hamas steals the supplies.
For 11 weeks, Israel allowed no aid into Gaza. 171,000 metric tons of food for Gazans just sat there.
There's enough food here for 200,000 people alone for an entire month.
Almost half of Gaza's 36 hospitals are destroyed or non-operational. Many of the rest are barely holding on. There are only 2,000 hospital beds available for more than 2 million people. About 60% of all physical structures, full stop, are damaged or destroyed. And Israel is not close to declaring victory. 20 months after October 7th, 20 months after this war began, Israel has no plan for the day after, no theory of who should govern Gaza, and is instead weighing escalation.
When I started to voice my criticism, I kept saying exactly this.
This is permission structure, for the record. This is permission structure when you got prominent, outspoken liberals with major platforms, prominent, outspoken liberal Zionists with major platforms coming out and basically attacking the current order of business. They are doing so because it has become undeniable, and this is your opportunity to use stuff like this to your advantage. This is your opportunity to show people that are still at the precipice, your parents that might have issues with this, but they're like liberal. You can point to this and then be like, these guys are not going hard enough. Israel is also in a state, you know. Obviously, a lot of the stuff that these guys are arriving at, a lot of the conclusions that they're finally arriving at 20 months in to this ongoing campaign is stuff that we already knew. And a little bit knowledgeable. If you were even a little bit knowledgeable on this issue, you knew exactly what Israel was going to do. You knew exactly what Israel had done thus far that caused so much enmity, that caused the Palestinian Resistance Coalition to, you know, take up arms against Israel on October 7. In events that absolutely were atrocious, for sure. Like, there were atrocities that took place on October 7. But there is a reason for why this happened. And people who were knowledgeable on the issue knew exactly why it happened. And liberal Zionists and liberals alike never actually, never forgave people like myself and many others for taking this commitment, taking this committed position to Palestinian emancipation at the time, and describing the reasons as to why October 7 happened. They consider that to be anti-Semitic and terrifying and totally up. But now, a lot of those people are either quiet out of shame because they recognize how much the attitude has shifted, or a lot of people are even coming out in opposition to Israel. So there we are. This is your opportunity to continue explaining to people. This is your opportunity to continue explaining to people what was going on already and what is still unfolding, and get them to recognize the reality.
How can you seriously expect to have the support of the international community?
Maybe this is a cynical take, but I feel like the only reason liberals care about this now is because Trump is president instead of Biden. That's certainly a factor as well. But they could have applied a partisan attitude during the election cycle, and they didn't. But so the very fact that they are only now applying a partisan attitude to this issue implies that the broader public sentiment has changed so dramatically that that it is undeniable. If you want to have any bona fides as a liberal, as someone who cares about like liberal democracy, these principles, even if you believe falsely through naivete or cynically that like Israel will ever become a liberal nation, a liberal democratic nation, it won't, for the record, because it's an ethno-religious supremacist. It's not gonna. It's antithetical to liberal democracy. Basically, you have to say these things because no one at this point will ever consider you to be a real liberal if you don't stand against what Israel is doing. You have to do it.
If you are not prepared to say what is your political horizon, what is your plan for the... I never heard an answer, and the reason why I never heard that answer is very simple. Yes, this is precisely what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and those who support
Destiny and his cronies are dead silent on Palestine after fighting months of aggressively pushing State Department agenda for damn near a year. Anyone sane left in those circles would see their grift at this moment. Yeah, there's no one sane left in those circles. But yeah, there's a reason for that. And that is because the tide has officially shifted. The tide has shifted. It swung so dramatically in the other direction. They made a bad bet and they are still leaning on it. And they're still trying to fight to the best of their ability. But if you noticed, even like this guy is anti-Semitic, this guy's smears don't even hit as hard. Because the more people come to this recognition that what Israel is doing is insane, the more they get hit as well. Like your parents that never would have thought about this kind of thing, that are finally saying these sorts of things and experiencing backlash, or seeing others who are like-minded experiencing said backlash, are very quickly recognizing that like the anti-Semitism and the terror smears actually are just cynical. They're purposeful, they're cynical, and that actually completely defangs that kind of attack. Miss Rachel is a great example of this. Someone like myself, not necessarily a great example of this because I obviously do not shy away from openly stating my radical perspective, but someone like Miss Rachel being called like a supporter from all these psychopaths who have been cackling about hospital bombings over and over again is going to make a lot of people go, I feel like you say that a lot about every single person. You understand? Miss Rachel is not Miss Radical. Miss Rachel is a white woman. Very powerful constituency. Very powerful group to attack like this. And not only is she a white woman, but she's a very kind white woman. A very kind white woman who's trying to do her very best and tackling this issue from the most defensible framework. Stop killing children. That's all she has said over and over again. And that has been treated like a crime by Israel defenders. When people see that, when your parents see stuff like that, even on the periphery, they go, oh, this is, I guess they just say this about everybody. That's why I loved the France Unbowed party member that was asked about me interviewing Mélenchon. They were like, oh, Mélenchon gave a platform to a vicious anti-Semite, this Hasan guy. He said all of these like crazy anti-Semitic things. His response was so clear, so perfect. He was like, you guys say that about anti-Israel and anti-genocide. Let's talk about the real issue that matters. Israel's killing children. Will you ask any of the other politicians why they are still supporting Israel? Because if not, I don't want to hear from you. Do you see what I'm saying? That's it. That is how you're supposed to compact this conversation up. Manuel Bompard, that was the, yeah, I think he was the guy who was giving an interview.
La bataille d'une star des réseaux sociaux américano-turcs qui estime que les...
Américain-turc, social media star, Manuel Bompard. Mélenchon sadly just had his own Bernie moment by comparing Ayatollah Khamenei to Netanyahu. Wait, what? Oh, God. No. I mean, it's not surprising, actually. They're French. They're French. They're French. They have, no matter how hard they advocate for Muslim migrants and stuff like that, they still have like some blind spots. You know what I mean? Oh my God, you were in the Croatian subreddit and one guy called you a terrorist piece of shit. Lamau, you had people defending you though? Oh, was it because I was wearing the Croatian kit? Anyway, I'm not going to watch this right now. Let's finish this.
They want to clean the area. in order to lay the foundations for greater Israel with so many Jews everywhere. Netanyahu, of course, knows that that's what they want. Netanyahu wants only one thing: save me at any cost. And he is prepared to comply with everything that they want in order to save himself.
A May poll found that 55% of his...
What's really interesting about this is that it's not untrue, but what Ehud Olmert is saying, by the way, from the same party, he is literally again not a liberal at all. Ehud Olmert is not a liberal Zionist. Okay, what he's saying here is true, but that's not the primary motivation. Benjamin Netanyahu will inevitably be the fall guy, and his legacy will remain intact if he is able to implement America's grand vision in the region. Okay? He knows this. His personal motivations for remaining in power are not the primary consideration here. This is not one man's agenda. Okay? This is not one man's agenda. And I'll prove it. Netanyahu's opposition in the Knesset and its opposition leaders have always lent support to Benjamin Netanyahu whenever he attacks Lebanon or whenever he attacks, when he started attacking Iran. Why did they do this? Because everyone in Israeli society, at least in the Knesset, with the exception of like the Communist Party, as we've talked about already, is perfectly aligned with the greater Israel project. Whether they actively support it, openly say that they want to do this, or whether they quietly support it in moments that matter the most. That's the difference. And therefore, because this the greater Israel project is a part of America's grand design in the region, because this is an aligned foreign policy goal for both the United States of America and Israel, okay? A region that is completely dominated by Israel and the United States of America. Israel is an extension of the United States of America. While there are sometimes differences in the way that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to operate, or differences in opinion internally and in the Israeli Knesset, the ultimate goal is still the same. And dismantling the Islamic Republic, or dismantling and destabilizing Iran, is a part of this project, which is why I think this last round of attacks was supposed to implement the final goal in the region, which is why I'm terrified that Trump is going to be the absolute mad lad that does it, that pulls the trigger. There are those who say Netanyahu chose this time to attack because of the political situation, but that doesn't interest me. I think this is the right decision, said Meirav Cohen, a Knesset member from the centrist Yesh Atid party, which leads the official opposition. Yeah, do you understand? There are those who say Netanyahu chose this time to attack because of the political situation. And it's true. That played a role in it, but not in the way that you think. Netanyahu and his coalition falling apart in the Knesset would have actually stopped any sort of unilateral action being taken against Iran. It was the last possible moment. Netanyahu getting ousted and his coalition falling apart, sure, might actually put him in legal scrutiny once again. That's a personal fear. But most significantly, from the perspective of Americans, from the perspective of American foreign policy, if that coalition falls apart, they're not going to be able to quickly put one back together to strike Iran. And considering that all of Iran's axis of resistance has been dismantled or diminished in its capabilities, this is the best opportunity for Israel to strike Iran without suffering severe penalties in the process. That was the assessment. That is the real assessment. It's not just to like whip up support from the opposition and stamp out any sort of like naysayers and shut down conversations about like the ethnic cleansing campaign in Gaza. That is one of the reasons, but it's a minor reason. The major reason, the broader strokes of this all, is the campaign against Iran and destabilizing Iran with minor penalties to Israeli society. And I think there was a miscalculation there as well, because I do believe that they thought Iran would either be super restrained, as they have been thus far, or not even have the capabilities of striking Israel with ballistic missiles. Okay? Or you know, they would have some baby hits here and there. I think Iran's retaliation has been, from the perspective of like any sort of resistance against Israel, Iran's retaliation, maybe not to the same degree as October 7, but has been more consequential for Israeli society than what Israel's calculation initially was. Netanyahu's political woes take a backseat as critics unite behind him over Iran. So it's their version of foreign policy being uniparty. As an anti-imperialist who actively has spoken out against Western adventurism and Western imperialism that dominates the planet, but specifically the global South, foreign policy is uniparty everywhere. That is the unfortunate reality. And it is the one issue that I think showcases so perfectly. It's the one issue that demonstrates so perfectly to even Western liberals that liberal democracy as a project is basically just a way to keep masses subservient. It's to make you feel like you have a say in the process, but you actually don't. When you look at the lack of interest from, the lack of appetite from the American public broadly in the aftermath of the failure of war on terror, of the war on terror that was incredibly costly, the human toll was tremendous, the amount of destabilization that took place and the displacement that took place was also too costly a burden for even Europe. People have developed resentment towards this kind of military campaigns in the region. There is not a lot of appetite amongst even American society that is normally super on board with things like this. Okay? It's like a 60-40, not even 60-40, 60% in opposition. I think it was like 14 or 15% in support of America joining the battle and striking Iran. When you have such a severe difference in opinion amongst the public and the united front that our politicians put on, that makes people recognize maybe democracy isn't real. And if people start recognizing that democracy isn't real, well, that's a dangerous prospect for Western governments. It's a very dangerous prospect for Western governments because liberal democracy needs a pressure valve. I've talked about this when comparing the different forms of governance that exist in places like China that are more authoritarian in comparison to places like America and the Western world that are significantly more liberal. That liberalism can only be maintained through the notion of democracy, to keep up appearances that like the democratic process is alive and well. It's the social contract. Every 4 years, you vote for your candidate that says they care about you, and then you feel like you've done your civic duty, and you feel like things will maybe marginally change for the better. And when that pressure valve no longer exists and people start recognizing that, oh shit, this is just as authoritarian as China, they don't give a fuck about me at all of a sudden, the environment is ripe for rebellion. It's ripe for revolution. This is part of the reason why China has to be hyper responsive to the needs of their population. If the Chinese government did not task themselves with consistently improving the material conditions of all Chinese people, there would be revolts. It would be impossible to tend to. China is a massive country. Think about it. Billions of people. It has a revolutionary history. An example of this took place with the COVID-0 policies that the Chinese government implemented. The instability born out of not knowing and the resentment that developed as a consequence of that, paired up with the complete control that everybody recognizes that the Chinese government has over broader Chinese society, created basically a small rebellion. And what did the Chinese government do? They immediately took action, and they released the shutdown policies that they had, the COVID zero policies that they had. That's it. Mark Thiessen. Donald Trump is not an isolationist, but I think some of the Republican isolationists are suddenly discovering that they're out of touch with the MAGA movement and Donald Trump. I have total confidence in Donald Trump. This is the guy who killed Qasem Soleimani. You think he's afraid to take out Forgo? Of course not. Forgo. Anyway, Trump retweeted this or posted this on his Truth Social, saying he's not an isolationist and that the MAGA movement is out of step with isolationism, or the MAGA movement is out of step with Trump's foreign policy opinions. This, I think, might frustrate a lot of people that are firm and committed supporters to Donald Trump on this issue, for sure, especially considering that this was a big campaign promise, a way that Donald Trump has presented himself, for sure. He's done this 3 times now in 3 separate elections, and 2 of them were successful, where he positioned himself as anti-war and pro-peace against Hillary Clinton successfully, and then did that against Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party for both the mishandling of Ukraine from the Democratic leadership. He was able to take advantage of the resentment that people had towards that, where it was like, oh, why are we giving so much money to Ukraine, right? That was the main meta there. And he was able to take advantage of the instability that was happening all around the world with respect to Gaza. And that was something that the public responded positively to.
Israelis believe Netanyahu's main goal is staying in power, not winning, not returning the hostages.
This is the tragedy that we're facing these days in Israel.
Someone please link the Nick Mullen tweet about Trump supporters. Yeah, send me the Nick Mullen tweet. I already saw it. I already liked it, but I would like to look at it again because it's very funny. I hope we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, but